My name is Daniel, and I've lived in Nevada my whole life. Most people think of Las Vegas when they hear that, but I grew up far from the Strip, in a quiet town surrounded by dust, cactus, and heat waves on the horizon. The kind of place where not much happens, and if you want something interesting, you go looking for it yourself. I was a senior in high school when this happened not even a month ago. Me and two of my closest friends, Charles and Mike, had this hobby. I guess you could call it urban exploring, although for us, it wasn't about graffiti or breaking things or proving anything. We weren't trying to be edgy, we just liked forgotten places. Old buildings, abandoned service tunnels, dead malls, anything the world had moved on from. We'd sneak past fences, crawl through broken windows, climb onto roofs, or find our way into basements. And it wasn't about stealing or destroying, it was about the vibe, the emptiness, the quiet. The stories you could almost hear echoing. In the walls of the three of us, Charles was the one who always found the best spots. He was quiet, smart, always had this calculating look like he was thinking 10 steps ahead. He rarely talked about where he found his info. Sometimes it was forums, sometimes satellite maps, sometimes weird corners of the internet. I never asked too many questions. One night he sent us a screenshot. It was from a sketchy Instagram account with barely any followers. The photos were grainy, shadowy, like they were taken with a flip phone. The caption just said, "Dozens of forgotten mine shafts in the Mojave Desert if you know where to look." Creepy comments were underneath, half in Spanish, half in broken English. One of them just said, "Don't go alone. It watches." Another said, "The desert eats what it doesn't want found." I figured it was fake, but Charles had already messaged the account. He said the person running it gave him coordinates, no address, just a pin drop in the middle of nowhere, miles off-road. That was all he needed to get obsessed. And when Charles got obsessed, there was no talking him down. That Saturday morning, the three of us packed up and headed out. I had a beat-up Jeep Wrangler that could handle desert trails, and Charles had printed out topographic maps just in case. Mike was dragging his feet, already skeptical. He said the whole thing sounded like a prank, like someone luring idiots into the desert for fun. But he still came. We all did. Part of us still wanted to believe that there were places out there not meant to be found. We drove for hours. The paved roads gave way to dirt, then gravel, then what barely passed for a trail. Every bump rattled the Jeep, and the farther we went, the less any of it felt like Nevada. It felt like Mars. There were no signs. No fences, just flat, dry earth. And silence. My phone lost service about 20 minutes in. Mike had already checked out, slumped in the back seat, muttering about turning around. Charles just stared at the map on his phone. Like a general in a war room. We reached a point where the trail disappeared altogether. I slowed down, unsure if we were even heading in the right direction. The desert was like a painting that never ended. Same hills, same colors, no landmarks. And then Mike said, "What the hell is that?" Off to the right, at the base of a small ridge, something caught our eye. At first it just looked like more collapsed rock. But as we got closer, we saw it, wooden beams, half buried. A structure built into the slope, rotting away under decades of heat. The top had caved in, but behind the broken slats of timber, there was a black void. A tunnel, a mine shaft. We didn't say anything for a few seconds. I just parked the Jeep. On a flat patch of dirt nearby, we stepped out, the heat hitting us like a wave. The wind barely moved. It was quiet, too quiet. Charles walked up to the mine entrance like he'd been there before. He pulled out his phone and dropped a pin. Then he turned to us and grinned. "Told you." Mike rolled his eyes, but I could tell even he was impressed. We were in the middle of nowhere, and somehow Charles had actually found one from the outside. The shaft looked narrow but passable. The wood bracing the entrance had aged to a gray that almost blended with the sand. Charles picked up a rock and tossed it into the hole. We waited. A second later, clang. Then another clang. Then silence. It was deep. I remember Charles turning around and saying, half joking, "If you trip going down, you're not coming back up." We all geared up. Charles had brought dust masks, gloves, and flashlights, way more prepared than I. Expected, that should have been my first red flag. He always came prepared, but never this prepared. We stood at the entrance, staring into the mouth of the mine, and we stepped inside. The air changed the second we crossed the threshold. It went from dry desert heat to something colder, denser, like the earth itself was holding its breath. The mine shaft sloped downward at an angle, not steep enough to need ropes, but sharp enough that we had to brace ourselves with each step. The ground was loose, a mix of dust, small rocks, and debris that shifted under our boots. Old wooden beams lined the walls every few feet. Most of them looked like they'd collapse if you breathed too hard, but they were holding, somehow. Charles led the way, flashlight in one hand, phone in the other. Mike followed behind him, and I took up the rear. None of us said much. It was the kind of silence that pressed on your ears. Not peaceful, not calming, just heavy. About 20 or 30 feet in, daylight disappeared completely. Our flashlights were the only thing keeping the dark at bay. The dust swirled in the beams of light like ash in still water. I kept looking back over my shoulder. I don't know why. Maybe I thought I'd see daylight again. Maybe I just wanted to make sure we weren't being followed. The deeper we went, the colder it got. Not freezing just wrong. Like the mine wasn't just underground, but under something else entirely. Eventually, after what felt like 15 minutes of slow descent, the tunnel leveled out. We stepped into a wider chamber, maybe 10 feet across, with old rusted rails running down the center. It split into 3 separate tunnels ahead of us, all swallowed by darkness. Charles stopped. He scanned the area with his light, then pointed to the middle tunnel. That one, he said. Mike looked at him. Why that one? Charles shrugged. Gut feeling. We didn't argue. There was something about being that deep underground that made you want to keep moving forward. Stopping felt unsafe. So we entered the center tunnel. The walls were tighter here, the air even staler. Bits of wood, metal scraps, and broken tools littered the floor. I kicked what looked like an old pickaxe head, half buried in the dirt. There were no animals, no insects, no sounds except our own footsteps and breathing, and then a sound, faint, distant. We all froze. It was like a dragging noise. Metal scraping across stone, slowly, steady, deliberate. I thought it was in my head, like some sound the mine was making as it settled. But then I looked at Charles. He had stopped too. Mike whispered, "Did you guys hear that?" None of us answered. Charles motioned to us, flashlights off. One by one, the beams disappeared, and we stood there in pitch black, eyes open but blind. The sound came again. Scrape. It was closer now, and I swear on my life I could feel it. Like whatever was making that sound wasn't just getting closer, it knew we were there. 30 seconds passed, maybe a minute, I don't know. Time didn't move normally in that place. Then click. Mike's flashlight flicked on for half a second and clicked off again. We all turned toward him, silently screaming, "What are you doing?" The scraping sound stopped. And for a heartbeat, the silence was worse than the noise. Then bang. A metallic crash exploded from somewhere deep in the tunnel. The kind of sound that echoes through your bones. And right after that, from the same direction, came a scream. I've heard people scream before. I've heard coyotes, wildcats, people in pain, but this was none of those things. It was rage. Pure, primal, unnatural rage. It didn't sound human, but it didn't sound animal either. It sounded like something trying to be human and failing. Charles didn't say a word. He just ran. Mike bolted after him, and I hesitated for half a second too long. Because behind me, in the tunnel we came from, I swear I heard something else. Something moving. I turned and ran, breath catching in my throat, heart pounding so hard it made my vision pulse. My light bounced wildly, catching glimpses of rusted rails and broken beams, and always that feeling that we weren't alone, that something had noticed us. The tunnel behind me felt like it was collapsing inward, swallowing sound, swallowing light. I could barely hear my own footsteps over the blood rushing in my ears. Every breath came sharp and dry, like sucking in powdered glass. I didn't stop. I didn't dare look back. Up ahead, Charles and Mike were already on the incline. Their flashlight beams bounced wildly as they climbed, not bothering to look back, not waiting for me. The slope was worse going up. Loose dirt and crumbling rock made it impossible to get solid footing. For every 2 steps I took, I slid back one. My lungs burned, my legs screamed. But the thing that kept me going was the sound behind me faint. But steady footsteps, not ours. Heavier, slower, like it wasn't rushing. Like it knew we had nowhere to go. I tripped. I don't even remember what it was, some old board, a pile of debris, maybe even one of the rusted rails. But I went down hard and one of my shoes came off. My flashlight flew out of my hand and rolled into the darkness. I scrambled up with one bare foot, blood already seeping into my sock. I didn't even think about going back for the flashlight, or the shoe, or anything. The only thought in my head was, don't stop. The incline was brutal. Every step felt like I was pulling myself out of quicksand. The pain in my foot was sharp and immediate. I could feel every tiny splinter and rock dig into my skin. But adrenaline does strange things to the body. It turned panic into fuel. It kept me moving when I should have passed out. Charles reached the top first. He was already outside, yelling something, but I couldn't make out the words. Mike was halfway up, struggling but ahead of me. I was alone in the dark, and the sound was closer now, not running. Just pacing. Like it was waiting for me to fail. I pushed harder. The moment I saw daylight, it felt like I was surfacing from underwater. I threw myself up the last few steps, barely able to crawl. My hands grabbed at dry dirt, my arms trembled, and I dragged myself out of that hell with the last strength I had. Sunlight blinded me. The heat slammed into my face, but I didn't stop crawling until I was far enough from the entrance that I couldn't hear that sound anymore. Mike and Charles grabbed me, each taking an arm, dragging me to the Jeep. My foot was mangled. There were open cuts and embedded wood all along the sole. My entire leg shook uncontrollably, and I could barely keep my eyes open. "Can you drive?" Charles asked. I just shook my head. Mike jumped in behind the wheel. I was barely in the passenger seat when he slammed it into gear and gunned it. The Jeep lurched forward, skidding slightly on the dirt, and we sped away without looking back. None of us spoke. There was no post-adventure laughter. No, holy crap, that was insane. Just silence. The kind of silence that clings to your clothes like smoke after a fire. I kept looking in the side mirror, half expecting to see something emerge from the mine. Nothing ever did, but that somehow made it worse. We drove for almost an hour without saying a word. The road back to town was just as empty as before. The sun was starting to dip, casting long shadows across the desert. The silence inside the Jeep wasn't peaceful. It was brittle. Like if any of us said the wrong thing, the entire memory would snap open again. I looked down at my foot. My sock was soaked in blood and turning brown from the dirt. Splinters stuck out between my toes, and parts of my skin were swollen and already bruising. I couldn't feel half of it, but that didn't mean it didn't hurt. Eventually, Mike broke the silence. What the hell was that? Charles didn't answer. He just stared out the window, holding his phone in both hands like he was texting, but not typing a single thing. Mike looked at me in the rearview mirror. "You saw it, right? Or heard it?" I nodded, slowly. "Yeah." "I mean, what the FCK makes a sound like that?" Again, no one had an answer. I wanted to say it was an animal. Some freak creature that got trapped down there. But that scream? The way it echoed? The rhythm of those footsteps? There was something about it that wasn't animal, but it wasn't human either. By the time we hit the edge of town, my head was spinning. I told Mike to take me to the, was no argument. He sped the rest of the way there. The nurse at the front desk didn't even flinch when I limped in with one shoe and half a sock. She asked what happened. I said I stepped on debris while hiking, a half lie. She didn't ask. Further, I got a tetanus shot, dozens of splinters removed. A few stitches. They told me to keep it elevated and avoid pressure. I pretended to listen. Charles and Mike waited in the lobby the entire time. They didn't leave until I was discharged and sitting in the back of the Jeep again. The ride home was just as quiet as before. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard it. The dragging. The metal on stone. The scream. I didn't dream about what I saw. I dreamed about what I didn't see. Something was down there, and it had watched us, listened to us, followed us. And we'd left. The door opened. 3 days passed before any of us spoke again. My foot was a mess. I couldn't walk properly, couldn't sleep. And every time I shut my eyes, I heard that scream somehow still echoing. Even though we were miles from that mine, I figured we were done, that none of us would ever bring it up again. But then Mike texted. He said he thought he dropped his wallet near the entrance while helping carry me back to the Jeep. He hadn't mentioned it before, probably because it didn't matter in the moment. But now he was panicking. Cards, ID, cash, all gone. He wanted to go back, just to the outside. No one was talking about going back in. Charles agreed immediately. Too fast, honestly. Almost like he'd already been thinking about it. I didn't want to go, but I couldn't let them go alone either. We waited until I could walk, kind of. I bandaged up my foot, shoved it into a soft boot, and limped out to the Jeep. Charles still had the pin on his phone. Same spot, same empty trail, same dead silence all around us. The sky was overcast this time, like even the sun didn't want to look at where we were going. The drive felt longer, heavier. I could feel the tension in the air. No music, no talking, just the crunch of tires. Over gravel. We reached the site in the early afternoon. Nothing had changed. The mine looked just like it had before, half collapsed and quiet. No footprints in the sand. No movement. Like we'd never been there at all. Mike jumped out and scanned the area near where the Jeep had been parked before. He moved in a wide circle, searching the brush, the dirt, the rocks. No wallet. I stayed back, near the vehicle, not even wanting to get close to the shaft. Charles, though, he walked right up to it. He stood at the entrance, just staring into the blackness like he was listening. I called out to him. He didn't answer. Then he bent down and picked something up. I limped over slowly, and when I got close enough, I saw what was in his hand. It was my shoe. The one I lost when I fell. It was sitting just a few feet from the mine's mouth, partially covered in dirt, like it had been placed there. I took it from him, confused at first. Then I turned it over, and I felt the blood drain from my face. The rubber was torn. Not like from scraping against rocks or being stepped on. Torn, chunks missing, jagged gashes along the sides and top. And then I saw them. Teeth marks, not small, not like a coyote or a bobcat. These were wide, deep, human-shaped, but oversized. Like someone or something with too many teeth had tried to bite through the shoe. Mike walked over and froze when he saw it. None of us said anything. We didn't have to. We all knew. Something had brought it back. Something wanted us to know it wasn't over. We got in the Jeep and left. Faster this time, no detours, no hesitation. The desert felt different now, not just empty, but aware. I didn't ask if Mike ever found his wallet. Honestly, I don't think he even cared anymore. You always assume that when something terrifying happens, once you get away from it, you're safe. That if you survive, it's over. But that's not always how it works. Something changed after we went back to the mine. It wasn't just that my foot still hurt, or that I kept replaying the scream in my head. It was little things I couldn't explain, things that made me feel like we hadn't really left the mine at all. It started with sounds. At night, I'd lie in bed, exhausted but unable to sleep. And sometimes just faintly when the house was completely still, I'd hear scraping. Not from inside my room, not from outside either. It was like it was coming from beneath the floorboards. Like something deep under the house was dragging itself slowly across stone. I thought I was imagining it. Blamed it on the wind, or plumbing, or old pipes. Anything but what it actually reminded me of. Then the dreams started. I was back in the mine, alone. My flashlight barely worked, flickering every few steps. And ahead of me, always just out of view, I could hear it. That same sound, the dragging, the breathing, something heavy moving in the dark. No matter how fast I moved, it always stayed just ahead. Just out of reach. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, heart racing, sometimes screaming. Mike wasn't doing much better. He stopped coming to school. Said he had the flu, but I knew that was a lie. He looked hollow. His eyes were red. His hands shook when he tried to drink from a water bottle. In class. I called him one night and asked if he'd been sleeping. He said, "Not really." When I asked why, he hesitated. Then he said, "Something's knocking on my window at night." I asked if it was a branch or an animal or the wind. He said no. He lived on the second floor. And Charles, he was the worst of us. He'd always been quiet. But now he was different, unreachable. He stopped replying to texts. Didn't show up to hangouts. When I finally confronted him in person outside of school, he barely looked at me. Just said, "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." I said, "Try me," and he just shook his head. "I think it's still down there," he whispered. "But I don't think it's trapped." That sentence stuck with me. I don't think it's trapped. It didn't matter that we'd left. It didn't matter that the mine was 100 miles away. Something had noticed us. And something wanted us. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that darkness. Not just remembered it, saw it. Felt the pressure of the earth around me. Heard something breathing where no breath should be, I thought. Maybe it was guilt, trauma, just fear playing. Tricks on my mind. But then my dog stopped going near the basement. She used to nap down there every day. But now she'd stop at the top of the stairs, growl, and back away. Sometimes she'd just stare at the door for hours. Ears up, whining. I told myself it was a coincidence, but deep down, I knew better. We'd gone into the dark and something had looked back. I didn't hear. From Charles for a week. Not a single text. No online activity. He stopped showing up at school altogether. At first, I thought maybe his parents had pulled him out. Maybe they noticed what was happening to him. But when I asked around, no one had heard anything. His phone went straight to voicemail. Then one night, just past midnight, I got a text from him. It only said, "I figured it out. Come over." No explanation. No follow-up. Against every ounce of better judgment I had left, I went. His house was dark when I arrived. Oh. The windows were shut. The porch light was off. But his car was in the driveway. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, harder. Still nothing. Then I tried the door. It was unlocked. Inside, the air was stale. The kind of stale that doesn't come from a closed room, but from something rotting. The lights were off, and it smelled like wet stone and dust, like the mine. Charles? I called out. Silence. I moved through the living room, past the kitchen, toward the basement door. It was open just a crack. And from down there, I heard it. Not footsteps. Not breathing. Typing. Like someone furiously pounding a keyboard. I called his name again. No response. I slowly descended the stairs. My heart was hammering in my chest. The smell grew stronger with every step. Dirt, old iron, something foul. The basement was lit only by the glow of a single monitor in the far corner. Charles was there, sitting in front of it. Back hunched, head tilted slightly. His screen was covered in open tabs, maps, forums, satellite images. Some of it was in English, some in Spanish. A few I didn't even recognize. "Dude," I started. "What the hell are you doing?" He didn't turn around. "I figured it out," he said. His voice was flat, tired, not like him. "What did you figure out?" He gestured at the screen. "It's not a mine. It's not abandoned." I waited. He turned slightly, just enough for me to see his face. His eyes were sunken, ringed with deep purple. His lips were cracked. His hands trembled. "It's not even hours," he whispered. "What are you talking about?" "I've been reading," he continued, eyes glassy. "Places like that. They're older than the maps. Older than the land. The locals have names for them, but they don't translate well. Something about empty watchers? Things that burrow deep, that wait. Some people think they're spirits. Others think they're physical. Doesn't matter. They don't want to be seen. But when you do see them," he stopped. "They don't forget." That silence after he spoke was heavier than anything I'd felt in that mine. I didn't know what to say. I just stood there, frozen. Then Charles looked at me, truly looked at me for the first time since we escaped the shaft. "I've been hearing it," he said. "In the walls, in the vents, I thought I was losing it. But then I started leaving out bait. Small things. Objects from the mine, metal scraps, dust samples." I stared at him, horrified. "You brought things back?" He nodded slowly. "I Think it's connected to the object, not just the place. My chest tightened. I left one in your Jeep, he added, almost as an afterthought. Just to test. My mouth went dry. You what? I needed to know, he said, almost apologetically. And now I do. That's when the lights flickered once, twice, and then the computer screen went black. We both froze. Then from the top of the basement. Stairs we heard the sound scrape drag dog scrape right above us. Charles didn't move. Neither did I. Then something knocked once, twice, 3 times. Slow, heavy. We were underground. Again, and something else was home. We didn't speak. We just listened. 3 knocks. Slow, deliberate, like whatever was up there knew we were down here and wanted us to hear it. Charles didn't flinch. He just stared at the basement ceiling like he'd expected it. Me. My breath froze in my throat. Every instinct in me screamed run, but my body wouldn't move. Then the knocks came again, but this time, closer, thump, 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 not on the ceiling now, on the basement door. I backed away. My foot hit a metal shelf and sent a loud clang into the air. Silence. Then click. The basement door creaked open. I don't know what I expected to see, maybe a shadow, maybe some figure. But there was nothing, just darkness. A thick, suffocating dark that pressed into the stairwell like smoke from an unseen fire. And then I felt it, a presence, cold and massive. Not moving fast, not even moving at all, just watching, breathing. It had been waiting for this moment. For the door to be opened, I turned to Charles. He wasn't afraid. He was calm. Still seated, hands folded in his lap, like he'd already made peace with what was happening. I'm not going, he said. What? He looked at me and his voice was steady. I brought it here. I let it in. I'm not running from it. Charles, listen to me, I started, but he shook his head. It wants attention. That's all? Maybe if I just give it that... I grabbed his shoulder. This isn't a theory. It's not a project. It's not a story for Reddit. It's real. It's here. And we don't know what it wants. We don't even know what it is. He looked at the stairs. I do. And then he stood up. I backed away instinctively. Charles walked toward the stairs. Toward the dark. I begged him not to. I actually said. The words don't do this, but he didn't stop. Didn't hesitate. He stepped onto the first stair, then the second, and before I could stop him, he disappeared into the darkness. I don't know what hit me harder watching him vanish, or the fact that I didn't hear a single sound after that. No scream. No crash, no whisper. Just nothing. That was when I ran. I bolted out the basement, slammed the front door behind me, and didn't stop until I was back in my Jeep. I drove like something was chasing me. Maybe it was. Maybe it still is. I didn't sleep that night. I called Mike. Told him everything. He didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, he chose to stay. I said, yeah. And Mike just whispered, that means it didn't have to follow us. I didn't respond because I wasn't sure he was right. Weeks passed. Charles never came back. His parents filed a missing person report. Police questioned me and Mike. We told them what we could, but left out the parts no one would believe. The mine, the scream, the presence. They searched his house. No signs of struggle, no signs of forced entry. The basement? Empty, like he'd never been down there, like none of it ever happened. They called it a runaway case. Said he probably had. A breakdown, stress, teenage pressure. He'd turn up somewhere, but we knew better. Mike changed after that. He stopped answering calls. Deactivated his socials. I saw him once weeks later, just standing outside the hardware store, staring at the wall. Like he didn't even recognize where he was. Or who he was when I said his name. He looked at me. And I'll never forget his eyes. They were red, bloodshot, like he hadn't slept in days. He said one thing, it doesn't stop. I asked what he meant. He said, it still comes around. Every night, same time. I thought it just wanted Charles, but he didn't finish, just turned and walked away. That night, I had another dream. Same tunnel, same darkness. But this time, Charles was there standing at the end of the shaft. Just far enough that I couldn't see his face. He didn't move, didn't speak. I started walking toward him, slowly. Flashlight flickering dot, and then he moved, but not toward me. He stepped aside, and something stepped out behind him. I woke up gasping for air. There were scratches on my bedroom floor, long, uneven, dragging marks. I don't have pets, and I live alone. The next morning, I opened the Jeep's glove compartment looking for a charger. Inside, tucked behind old receipts and papers, was something I didn't remember keeping. A small, rusted nail, old, bent, covered in red desert dust, just like the ones that lined the rails in the mine. I threw it out the window immediately. Drove 3 miles and tossed it into a drainage ditch. It was gone, but the next day it was back. Same nail. Same spot, like it had never left. That was when I started hearing footsteps again. Not from inside the house this time. From beneath it. From the ground. Slow, scraping. Like something pacing just under the floor. Waiting. And the worst part? Every time it happens, I feel less afraid, less surprised, almost like I'm getting used to it, like I'm being worn down, piece by piece, until I forget why I was scared in the first place, until I let it in, like Charles did. That it's been nearly a month since Charles disappeared. No one's heard from him. Not a message, not a sighting, not a body. He's just gone. I don't think he's dead. Not really. Because some nights I hear something in my house. Something quiet, careful, a presence that's not quite there, but isn't entirely gone. Either. Sometimes I'll wake up in the middle of the night and see my closet door slightly open. I know I shut it. I always shut it. But there it is, cracked open just enough, and sometimes I'll hear breathing that isn't mine. Slow, deep, rhythmic, from somewhere near my bed, or under it. Or in the walls. I don't check anymore. Not because I'm brave, but because I'm tired. The fear doesn't go away. It just becomes familiar. Like white noise. I've thought about going back to the mine, just to see, just to know, maybe that's what it wants. For me to come looking again. Maybe that's what happened to Charles. He didn't fall into something. He followed it. Willingly. Because once you've seen it, once it sees you, it plants something in your head. Not a memory. Not a curse, a pull on. Maybe the only way to stop the sound, the dreams, the scratching, is to give in, but not tonight. Tonight I'm just going to turn out the light, lie still, and pretend I don't hear the footsteps coming up from the crawl space. And if I wake up with dirt on my floor again, I won't clean it up this time. I'll take it as a warning, or maybe an invitation.